We booked our client a call with Asana within 15 days of sending, among six other 150 employee to 1,000 employee brands. And we did it in a saturated market, so to speak. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the exact campaign we did, how we built it, and how you can apply it to a bunch of other markets, because it all revolves around a simple method I like to call the CCC method, which sets you up for really, really qualified calls. Now, let's break that first kind of belief, which is that markets are saturated, which I don't believe is true. Eventually, markets go out of existence. And sure, there's markets where there's competition. But from a cold email point of view, I don't think it's really about the saturation of market, more so the maturity of the market in the context of your current positioning. This is what causes problems. And you see these photos. I promise they're very, very relevant to what I'm about to say. So, markets work in adoption cycles. And this is one of the most important principles that we've embedded into our sending in 2025. So, in 2020, you could get away with sending audits, for instance, in SEO, and not just get away with it, you would be hyper successful. But if you peel back the layers of that and you actually think about why that is, the reason why it was successful is because the maturity of the market was in a position where the tools to execute on that audit at scale were still quite immature. They were not adopted by everyone. If you go back last year, AI became a craze. Being able to do blogs at scale became something very exciting and very attractive. If you're an SEO agency, you would benefit from positioning around that, positioning behind these tailwinds. Now, what this campaign revolves around is what I believe is something that people are still yet to position around effectively. And most positioning for my business and my clients comes from finding pain or problems in public facing environments. And that's what this campaign revolves around. And it's not just applicable to SEO, it's applicable to a wide array of businesses. And I'll explain why. Now, to prove this kind of concept and really to kind of go into why positioning is important, I brought up Squat University. Now, at a glance, you wouldn't expect Squat University to be this incredibly high level trainer, physiotherapist, I think. But that's just because you're looking at it at surface level. This is how he gets curiosity, which is the first C of the CCC method. Curiosity can come in many shape and forms. In this case, the shape and form is an attractive young woman in an athletic position, we'll call it. And he knows that people like attractive women. They doom scroll on Instagram to try to get as much dopamine instead of going outside and meeting someone. And because of this, he's able to position himself in his own little pocket of clickbait, but he always makes sure that it's within the context of the message he's trying to send. So he might compliment her puppy pose and go into the benefits of the puppy pose. He might compliment her deep squat and go over how to avoid butt winking, or how much butt winking is okay, or really go into huge detail about increasing ankle mobility, or why it's very, very important not to wear shoes. He clickbaits, but he does it with context, which is the second C. So let's go into how we achieved curiosity to book these huge businesses in a saturated market. How did we do it? Well, the first step is to find an edge, find an asymmetry. To find one, we use deep search. In this case, it was Perplexity Deep Search. I think O3 is fantastic now as well. But what this helps you do is it finds opportunities to address public-facing problems, helps you identify pain points, and it also helps you understand the best way to serve up these problems at scale. Because finding a problem manually is one thing, but to do it across a list of 3,000 is a whole nother problem. And in this case, it's also a cost problem, because just for this one lead list of around 3,100 contacts, we had to pay around $220, which could be a deterrent to some people. But just understand that the investment is often worth it if you have a public facing problem that you can position around, right? to position around. He could never do this successfully if he didn't position around it. Okay. So I'm going to give you the entire prompt for our research approach. It's a derivative of Jordan Crawford's prompt from his course. It just has a little bit of bending to it for kind of my needs and what I like to look for in my campaigns. And what this is going to do is it's going to tell you the market context, the market history. So all those things I just mentioned about the evolution of the SEO market and its adoption rate. Your goal is to position around something new that is being adopted, but is not adopted by anyone yet. And by the way, regulatory changes can be a huge needle mover on stuff like that, depending on the context, as a little bit of a tip for you. So how did we achieve curiosity? Well, we asked a provocative question and we reinforced it with an unexpected insight. And we didn't really create time sensitivity, although I think it was naturally created just in the context of this message. But why does this pique curiosity? Well, because being able to see a problem directly, right, highlighted to you is always going to feel highly relevant. And when you back it up with an industry insight that is cited, you're putting yourself in a position where your problem is reinforced by the data, right? It's not just a thing, it's a problem with a direct measurable impact. So in this case, by doing our market research, we found that 97% of product-led queries show Reddit in the top 5. So we went sicko mode, we went crazy, and we figured out a flow to be able to identify negative Reddit posts that have over a certain number of likes and a certain number of comments that would be showing up in the SERP and potentially steering away thousands of customers on their own. Because this isn't just, hey, there's a bad Reddit review. It's, here's a bunch of trolls that are literally causing 97% of the people that are in buying position to look at your product and potentially say no, right? Because most people aren't clicking links anymore. It's showing up in AIO. There's more context to this, right? And we'll get into the context as we move on here. But you can see how this would be potentially attractive because we've positioned this problem around a change in the industry, an adoption change in the industry. And the time sensitivity is immediate because people are actively searching right now. So this is the curiosity. And lately, we don't book people on the first email. So half of these we sent out with no call to action. It's just the question. How are you managing reputation across X right now with posts like blank on r/blank? You know, the one about you denying 5 pet claims in a row on behalf of a family? Kind of crazy, right? Like, that's kind of crazy. So when you serve up problems like this and then you reinforce them in our next step, which is to provide context, if this ever lets me scroll again. There we go. You're going to be able to establish interest, relevance, and credibility all in 2 steps. And the reason you don't want to send this all in one step is because you're just not going to deliver. Delivery is the priority. So we go short first step, context, and second step. And this is how we're averaging 4.7% deliverability across our Outlook infrastructure on behalf of all of our clients, right? That's the average across all clients, which is pretty solid. So the context comes from industry understanding, basically how this positioning, how this problem applies to your industry and the context of the market, right? So expanding on those stats and adding more. For example, 47% of queries these days are answered by Reddit in AIO on average, product-led queries, and they never involve a link click, which means that your customers are seeing that post and they're not getting all the comments that may go against it, or even worse, the comments that reinforce it, right? A lot of people aren't clicking links anymore. It also means in their heads, they're seeing that my blogs are less important than this strategy, right? And so it's predicated on building out and positioning the offer to kick the negative posts out of SERP. So we provide that context, right? So we say, so we can avoid trolls from, kick them out of SERP so we can avoid trolls from basically influencing buying decisions, right? Whoa, that's really clever. That's not just an SEO audit and me being egotistical and saying that I'm going to be able to solve this problem better than people being paid, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of dollars, potentially millions of dollars of spend across your department, right? That's pretty egotistical. Like, I know your business better than all these experts. These are big businesses we're contacting, right? That might make it in the context of smaller businesses, right? And more immature businesses. But this is compelling because it's something that isn't adopted yet. They don't understand how to solve it yet. And they view it as a big problem because we're presenting it as a big problem. So we'll do something like providing value, providing why it's important, providing how it's solved, right? Providing social proof of relevant teams that we're helping through this problem. And this recipe creates a campaign that gets just as many positive responses in the first step as it does the second step. And our only goal is to either provide a demo or open up a conversation around the pain point. We're selling the conversation as the next steps towards the solution. And that's where cash comes in. Because we're positioning ourselves around a publicly available problem. No assumptions. We know it's there, right? Maybe with hallucinations, we're getting it wrong, 0.1% of the time or 1% of the time when we actually write it out with AI, right? Maybe it's slightly askew, slightly ajar, not presenting the problem perfectly. But it doesn't matter because we're backing it up with the link if asked, right? So we have everything we need. We're serving up a spicy problem, okay? A big problem. We're presenting it as a huge problem. This could be costing you thousands of customers. We're setting the value proposition around that and showing we're capable with relevant teams, right? And we're not just pushing for a call after highlighting this. We're giving them context. We're giving the context around the curiosity and reinforcing the issue and reinforcing that we're the right people for the job before we move on to next steps. And that's exactly why, so far, both calls that have showed up for a 15 to 30K retainer offer are moving forward to next steps and the proposal. Both calls at large businesses within 15 days. So if you want something like this for your business, to find asymmetries in your market, to find message market fit would be the buzzword, to take your product and position it in a way that is attractive to specific market segments based on public data, book a call and we can have a conversation. I don't know if you're a paying qualified segment because this is a YouTube video, but we'll find out if there's anything interesting we can do, or worst case, we'll figure out if there's any specific kind of gaps in the way you're doing things that can be solved immediately. So what does this all mean for you? Well, you can apply this to basically everything. Curiosity, context, cash. Curiosity, context, cash. Deliver well, highlight a problem. Provide context to the problem and position around it with your service. Make money because the meeting is going to be super interesting and super qualified, not just, fishing for a broad outcome, like a revenue marker, right? So how can you apply this to other campaigns? Well, you can apply this Reddit one to basically anything and reviews to basically anything. You could look for reviews that mention slowness in certain businesses that lead to you offering automation. You could look for reviews that mention customer service issues. You could look for reviews that, depending on the business, right, that mention inability to complete the onboarding process, onboarding problems, and maybe you'll pitch content or videos that help with onboarding. The world is your oyster. Just do the market research first to understand the context in the industry, position around it, and then create, or find, I should say, a public-facing problem that you can then position your product around. And that's just a recipe to get meetings that turn into customers, because that's what matters. If this helped and you want me to take a look at how you could apply this type of concept to your business, leave a comment or shoot me a message on LinkedIn at the link below, and I'll go through a similar process for you guys at no cost, just so you can see how you can relate it to your industry.